Welcome to Decoded, the podcast that decodes the design, technology, and experiences shaping our world and planet. I am Melisa Leñero.
And I'm Saeema Christensen. Together we explore the systems, behaviors, and technologies influencing how we live, work, and connect, from human interactions to the ecosystems we are part of.
Each episode is a conversation with technologists, designers, entrepreneurs, and everyday users. Join us.
Hi, welcome back to the show. I'm Saeema Christensen.
And I'm Melisa Leñero.
And I'm a professor of design engineering and innovation and director of DigitLab, which is exploring design and digital technologies. We're based in the London offices of the University of Exeter.
And I am a designer by training and currently rediscovering what design is in times where the world is challenged in many different ways, from the artificial intelligence revolution to deep societal changes and massive ecosystem destruction. And in today's episode, we are very happy to be exploring with Rachel Bronstein from the Design Council the role of design in considering the planet.
Yeah, that's fantastic to have you here, Rachel. So Rachel is program lead for skills at the Design Council, where she leads the Skills for Planet movement, an initiative which is aiming to upskill 1 million designers with critical green skills by 2030. So she established the foundations of the skills program, co-creating the blueprint with over 100 design leaders and building partnerships across both education but also industry. And she's continuing to lead the development of the skills and piloting the practical upskilling of the approaches across those forums of education, design leaders, to translate this theory into action and grow this movement. And Rachel, you bring a multidisciplinary background with both private, public, and third sector, as well as experience of delivering programs all the way from discovery through to delivery. And you're an on-purpose fellow, which is with a strong grounded in systems thinking, movement building, and values-led leadership, which applies to driving change at scale, which is, I guess, the ambition with this program. So first of all, welcome to the show, Rachel. We know that design has changed a lot over the years. In the last decade, there's lots of changes that are coming because of digital technology. There's a lot of focus on social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and the role of designers have changed to consider ethics, but also the planet. At the same time, almost everything in our world is designed, so our responsibility is huge in there. Can you talk us through what has driven the Design Council to consider their mission and what is driving the movement for skills of the planet? And it might be helpful just to say what the Design Council is.
Absolutely. So, hi everyone, great to be here. For those of you who don't know, the Design Council is actually an independent charity, and we exist to champion the value of design nationally, so in the UK. And we were set up in 1944 under Churchill's government. And I think what you're saying there about the change in design over time is actually mirrored in the change of the Design Council over time as well, organisationally. So when we were set up in 1944 under Churchill's government, our whole ambition was around industrial design, lots of making things and kind of heavy industry.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to now, and our mission as of 2021 has been design for planet. So obviously there's been lots in between, which you can read in our book, our 80th anniversary book that the Design Council published last year. But obviously lots has happened within that time. But if you think about that shift over the decades, it's quite an interesting mirror of what's been happening within the design sector generally. So as I said, as of 2021, our mission has been design for planet. And the reason for that is because it's become increasingly impossible to ignore the huge challenges that we face across the globe when it comes to the climate and biodiversity crises that we're facing. And we know that design has a huge role to play. And actually, design has a responsibility to play here as well. We know that design can play a huge role because 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. And what that means is that design has the power to influence what happens with product, or if we want to look more broadly, services, built environment, and so on. Design has the opportunity to decide early on whether something that is designed is going to have a positive environmental impact or a negative one. So that's really important.
Right. Thank you. I really love what you said, that is going from industrial design all the way to where we are in terms of planetary development skills. The first episode that we have, Saeema and I, we were discussing exactly that. Both of us studied industrial design. So yeah, it's great to see also how many designers have moved or evolved from industrial design to digital skills, all the way to environmental skills. So if we hold into what are the green skills that designers need in 2025, like if that would be a new designer or like someone that would like to study design, what do you recommend that are these new green skills that we're referring to?
Yes, good question. So I realize I told you about Design Council and Design for Planet mission, but not the skills part of what we're doing. So let me tell you a bit about the Skills for Planet movement that we launched in 2024. So essentially, one of the big pieces of work that Design Council does is our design economy research that is published every few years. And in 2024, we published our skills gap report as part of that design economy research. And through that report, we discovered that while 71% of designers think that demand for environmental skills in their jobs is only going to grow, only 43% of them say that they have the skills needed to meet that demand. So that evidences a skills gap. What that means is that there's an increasing demand for green design skills, but not the supply to meet it. So given our role, as I said, for the champion of the value of design, and within that Design for Planet specifically, what can we do to close that skills gap? So that was the birth of our Skills for Planet mission in 2024. And I started in this role as a skills lead, managing the skills program about a year and a half ago when the program launched. And since then, that's been the big question. What can we do to close this skills gap? So we started with the Skills for Planet blueprint, which you mentioned at the beginning, Saeema. And that was really our opportunity to set out what do we mean by green design skills, right? Because we can't hope to support designers in gaining green design skills if we don't first say what they are. It's quite a logical first step. So in terms of what they are, in the blueprint, we set out green design skills across 6 skill areas. So those are regenerating nature, embedding circularity, eliminating emissions, influencing green behaviors, evaluating green impact, and empowering green communities. I really should have written those down, but I do know them by now. And within each of those 6...
Well, you have a great memory.
Yeah. I was just, as I was going through, I was thinking, hang on, I should really have.
Okay, I know them all.
I know what they are. And within those 6 areas, there are 3 green design skills within each. And those are also supported by a foundational set of design skills, as well as a green design mindset. And together, holistically, those form the Skills for Planet. So if we're asking what green design skills designers need in 2025, obviously I'm biased, but I would say start with the Skills for Planet blueprint and look there, because what we've tried to do is sit at a cross-disciplinary high enough level that the majority of those skills should speak to the majority of designers. Obviously, there's going to be the need within different disciplines to dig a level down and to make sure that you're supporting those cross-disciplinary skills with the specific specialist skills that you need, but those are a really solid green design skill foundation.
No, those are really interesting skills, and they resonate. We've got an episode in a few weeks coming up with Professor Delfina Fantini on regenerative design. So just one of those skills are they hold so much content, and they're quite complex. So this is a fascinating project. And you mentioned the blueprint. perhaps we could think about behind the scenes. So how do you identify these 6 skills? What was it like? What was the process to get you there?
Good question. And I don't often get to talk about the process. And it was something that I thought about a lot and the team thought about a lot, because obviously we can all go away in our echo chambers and write up what we think these skills are. But obviously, I'm sure you and your listeners will appreciate that we want to make sure that we're doing the due diligence and that we're having a co-creation process at the heart of what we're doing. So the process was very much co-designed. The blueprint was co-designed from the outset. We started with some ideas as to what we thought those skill areas could be. And then we hosted a series of workshops with design leaders across industry, education, and government to really dig into what those skills are and whether those are even the right skill areas to be going with. What was really interesting was that initially we had a workshop separately on systems thinking as a green skill area. What we found was that every single workshop, we hosted 7, every single workshop brought up systems thinking skills or systemic design skills as core to whatever the outcome, desired environmental outcome is, whether you're regenerating nature, embedding circularity, systems thinking is there. So because of that, we actually pulled it out as a foundational green design mindset, which you can see in the blueprint. So, we were open-minded. We were trying to evolve what the blueprint could look like as we went. We created a draft and then iterated it with a handful of design council experts who we're very lucky to work with and could give some more kind of subject matter review with each of the skill areas. And then we went from there. I think what I learned in the process is it's obviously really important to respond to feedback and to take all considerations seriously. But at some point you do have to put pen to paper, and that can be scary. But actually, once you've got the basic scaffolding there, you can build on that. And we've not published the blueprint saying this is 100% definitive. This is what it's going to look like in every single case. It is a guide. It is a starting point. It is an opportunity to create a shared language across disciplines that allows people to then move forward and take action.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's interesting what you say about systems thinking. So I recently led a project on systems thinking approach to redesign healthcare. So, and that was because if you design services, often you think about just the service and the health on its own of a particular illness or pathways, clinical pathways. But thinking about the entire system was important. So that systems level thinking I think is having a rebirth beyond green skills. And in one way, I find that really exciting because it's across all design areas that we're seeing this sort of transition. But in another way, it's also introducing a level of complexity that's quite challenging in there.
You've been working with at least 40,000 designers that have been upskilled, according to the blueprint. Can you talk us through some of the concrete examples of what has happened since the launch?
Absolutely. So we published the Skills for Planet blueprint in June 2025. So importantly, it's not yet even been a year, but what we were really clear on from the moment that we launched the blueprint, even beforehand actually, is that what we don't need is another 2-dimensional report. What we don't need is another set of words on a page that nothing happens with. And we were really clear that we wanted the blueprint to be a starting point, not an end point. It's not the conclusion of this work. It's the birth of what's to come. So what we did after launching the blueprint was start to think carefully about, okay, we've got this set of green design skills that we've defined in the blueprint. How then can we go about embedding these, and what does that mean? So firstly, what I would say is that we need green design skills to be embedded across the entire design ecosystem, and it needs to be joined up. So what that means is that we've been thinking about how these skills can be embedded within the school system. So how can young people develop these skills, the designers of the future? How can designers who are being educated at university develop these skills? And then how can designers who are in industry continue to develop and hone these skills once they've landed in a job? So we're looking at all three kind of broad stages of a designer's journey. And when it comes to thinking about schools, what do we mean by that? What does green design being embedded in schools look like? Well, it means that green design skills are embedded in the curriculum. So specifically the design and technology and art and design curricula, but also it could be wider than that, right? Because we know that design is a cross-cutting skill that could sit in other subject areas too. So we need pupils within schools, but also their teachers to possess these green design skills. An example of some progress that's already been made there is that our close friends and partners at Pearson have already developed some resources to help teachers embed these green design skills within art and design subject that they teach. So that's already happening. That's already live. Pearson have published those resources and teachers are starting to use them, which is amazing. We've also had quite an important policy win recently, which is that we know that sustainability is going to be embedded into the curriculum for design subjects. And that has come through the curriculum assessment review process that's happening at the moment, which, you know, it's easy to say that this is a policy win. We're yet to see it kind of bear fruit, but that's such an important systemic lever to encourage design shifts in education in the right direction.
Yeah. Is
Then,
that for GCSEs that the curriculum will be adapted?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that's a big win to have.
Yeah.
And I think importantly as well, we need to have these wins at a policy level, but we also need to have specific examples within individual schools, right? And so the kind of systemic approach is really making sure that we're operating at those different levels. Then I also mentioned universities. So our approach with universities has been to try and encourage design departments within universities across the country to embed the Skills for Planet blueprint explicitly into their design courses. And excitingly, we already have 15 universities who have committed to doing that. So they are all starting to embed the blueprint and work out what that looks like for them within the design programs that they teach, which is great. We are working very closely with CHEED, who are the Council for Higher Education in Art and Design, on how we can get all 70 of their university members to embed the blueprint. And we're starting to develop some traction there, which is brilliant. And then finally, in industry, what does it mean for a designer who is already practicing to start to develop the skills? This is really interestingly has been the kind of part of the program that has almost been hardest, which you might not expect. But actually, if you think about it, within the education system, teachers in schools and educators within universities are motivated to teach their students the skills of the future, right? That's literally in their job descriptions. Whereas once you get into industry, there's several competing priorities. That's not to say educators don't have competing priorities, but broadly speaking, the objectives align. Whereas in industry, you're looking at wanting to make a profit. You're looking at other skills that are fighting for attention, like AI, for example, at the moment. So what we've found is that we've had to work harder to speak to an industry audience, but we've got some really exciting pilots in progress this year of the program that are looking to do that. So one of them is that we're looking at developing a Design for Planet Transitions Learning Lab. So we're working very closely with UAL on this at the moment, and we're trying to create a destination for all Skills for Planet learning that would be tailored towards mid-career designers. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a taste of what we're doing. There's a lot going on.
It's a lot. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it is a lot. And can I just slot in? What I'm imagining is if we would need to summarize it, then it would be kind of like the blueprint brings a design process. Like what I'm imagining is that teachers now can know what is it kind of like the design process, and then from there also put some regenerative nature, embedding circularity, et cetera, skills into the curricula. So it's at the same time you are also showing the process of design. Is that safe to assume?
I think the process of design comes through more strongly with our systemic design framework, which is still an underpinning of the Skills for Planet blueprint, but actually the skills are sort of sit foundational to a process, I would say, that they can interact with any part of a design process. So they're not one and the same with a process, but there's a relationship there.
So upskilling of people is one part of impact. So if we draw a parallel with the digital economy, one of the barriers to the digital economy has been skills, leadership, but there's other barriers. There's the adoption, there's understanding the value and understanding the infrastructure. And if we look, so from the program, we will be upskilling, particularly the schools, and bringing that education forward. Understanding design for the planet, and perhaps not as comprehensively as the regenerative design or regenerative nature, and bringing all these elements together, has been part of industrial design programs for about 30 years. It was there when I studied. We did design for environment, which would cover quite a few of the ideas that are here. Alongside skills, there's tools and processes. So there's life cycle analysis and tools that are adopted. And what you've said about industry actually doesn't surprise me in the slightest. So there are some executive education programs. Exeter has one with Ellen McCarthy focusing on circular economy, alone with industry coming through. But actually to make impact, it's beyond educating people. It's having an uptake and having industry accept that this is an important criteria. Have you started to see any evidence of impact? So the skills making a difference on what's designed, or making a difference on a process, as Melissa sort of mentioned, the processes that go alongside?
I think it's probably too early to be looking for end outcomes being achieved, because if you think about it, the blueprint was only launched in June, so there's not been that much time. And because we're looking at really embedding this in a deep systemic way, it does take time to land, and it does take time to translate across those audiences, as I said, from school to university to industry. But what I would say is that the evidence we do have so far is partly anecdotal, I suppose, but as we go through the process, we'll get harder evidence. But what we're hearing is that it is really helpful to have a blueprint, to have a document that can speak to design educators, but can also speak to designers in industry, and try to create that shared language. Because I think, you said that in your education, you were already talking about regenerative design 30 years ago. That might be true, but one of the points of breakdown that we hear a lot is that there's not a join up between what you're being taught in education and then what skills are being desired or being nurtured within industry. So what we're trying to do is create opportunities for that join up and that follow through. And that's the bit that's going to take time, but it's also the bit that we're really excited about, and starting to get early indicators that there are opportunities there and that people are finding value in that shared language.
Yeah, it wasn't regenerative design. I think regenerative design is quite new. It was sustainability in design that was being taught at that time. We are seeing programs and complete master's programs in regenerative design that are appearing. But I think that what I'm really pointing to is that we can motivate people. And I heard recently that one of the motivations attracting people to design, particularly females, is, and I don't have any data, so this is only anecdotal, is the desire to do good, to use design to make the world a better place. When you come to becoming a company, you need to consider profits and business value. So it's not enough to have a motivation. And designers, there's a lot of design careers where you may start just your own studio, or you may be part of a consultancy, but you may also end up in a large company where you're a little tiny brick in a big wall, and where you've got those competing priorities. But beyond those competing priorities, everything you do needs to make a profit and hit the bottom line. So how as we go forward with your program, it's about bringing those two bits together. And how do you see that happening, or what would you be seeing? Because it's motivating the companies, really.
Yes, this is really interesting. And this is one of the challenges that I think sits at the heart of why it has been harder for us to reach into industry and to have the cut through that we have had with the education system. But in October, we convened a group of design leaders in business to look at this exact challenge. And one of the things that came out really strongly was about narrative. So a lot of the design leaders that were in the room were, already convinced that actually it's a false binary between profit and sustainability. Often we see them as in conflict, but that's not always the case. But what we need is a narrative that helps demonstrate that.
Yeah.
So in a recent report I read by Bain, they found that actually 60 to 70% of high growth companies view sustainability as a lever for future proofing. We also know that workers with green skills are hired at a rate of nearly 47% higher than the global average. So we need stats like that to be cutting through. We need this narrative around sustainability and profit to come closer together rather than to always be seen in opposition with one another. And I think the thing that helps that as well is examples where it works, right? So if I can just give one of the examples that's in the blueprint, it's a company that I rate really highly called Bean London, and they are an accessories and homewares company. They're one of the case studies in the blueprint for embedding circularity. And what they do is they take what might ordinarily be seen as waste, but for them as a resource, and they turn it into products. They're a fully circular organization. They find business opportunities in what will otherwise go to landfill. And they are able to make a profit and be a really exciting startup that the likes of DHL and Tate Modern have collaborated with, but they are also operating fully in a way that is beneficial to planet as well, and looking at some really cutting edge materials as part of their process. So it is possible, and it is becoming increasingly important that designers, but also those who hire designers, realize that we can bring these two things together, and we should try our best to do that.
That's great in terms of the stats, right? Like they're quite powerful when you get those statistics from Bain, from McKinsey, from Statista, Gartner, et cetera. At the same time, how the blueprint also is ensuring that it's not working on silo, right? Like sometimes, and probably you mention it or touch on it, but stats are great to add into the narrative with companies and to include companies into the conversation and show them actually there's many other companies that value sustainability. But in this case, design sometimes, and that has been my critique, sometimes we work on a silo, not because we want to or because we are not invited to the table, et cetera, et cetera. So how the Design Council, and now with Project Blueprint, that sounds amazing, ensures that it's not working on a silo, kind of like this great ideas that have been co-created with other designers, and ensuring upskill designers unlock new job opportunities?
It's a great question. And I think that obviously as Design Council, our focus is and has to be on the design piece of the puzzle. But because we see design, and I hope I'm sure you do too, as such an important strategic lever, what we want to do is encourage this belief that design has real value to bring to the green transition. And if we can do that, as I said before, across different levels of the system, then we should help ensure that designers are sitting in the heart of those conversations with other parts of the sector or with other kind of verticals within an organization, right? So, for example, one of the things we do at Design Council is policy and advocacy. So what we're trying to do continuously is to show government that actually design has real value that it can bring to the green transition through Skills for Planet, but also more widely than that. And if we can do that and we can elevate design to what it should be, which isn't just kind of a part of a process, but is actually how we think from the outset, the skills we use from the outset, the way that we set strategies, then we can hopefully start to see some real cut through across all parts of the sector, wherever you sit.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of policy? Because I think for me, it's quite interesting to hear that you're also what I'm hearing is that you are going from the level of ground level, which is talking to the people that are going to be utilizing the skills, teaching the skills and so on. But then you go all the way to policy, which is amazing to hear, especially now that design has been more put aside since AI has come in. However, they should be together. That's another episode and that's another conversation. But for now, what can you tell us about some examples, or kind of like what are other policies that you have been kind of thinking through, or kind of what is a vision, what should be kind of like the best policy that we should have as the UK that embeds design into our skills and into the UK workforce?
So you'll have to ask my colleague Shamir for more detail on the policy side of things, because that's his job. But what I would say is that what we're trying to do is to look at policies across different parts of the problem, as it were. So, for example, one of the things that we've been exploring at the moment is the V levels that the government are looking to develop. So that's vocational levels. And we already have similar type programs that exist, but what we're trying to do is ensure that we're not just thinking about education as it applies within schools or universities, but also alternative routes to getting into design, and to making sure that once people do get jobs in design, that they also have the cross-cutting design skills and skills for planet that they need as well. So we're looking at how we can support V levels in that way. That's one of the things that we're doing. But we're also just trying to always be cognizant of what are the motivations of the government of the day, right? What are the key policy drivers that the government are looking at the moment? And how can we ensure that our agenda and our needs for the whole design sector are reflected in that? So it's often a bit about trying to listen to what government is saying and use some of that language so that we're appealing there, but also to think about the other way round, which is how can we ensure that our needs as the design sector are reflected in policies that then cut through.
That's interesting. And I spoke to Kat Drew from the Design Council recently, where she was given examples with the recent review of creative sectors and AI, of how the Design Council was instrumental in gathering evidence from designers and feeding into that review, which hopefully will impact policy at some point. So we could see that role quite strongly. Now, you've talked about this movement of what's the official way of calling it? Is it the Skills for
Planet movement?
Yeah, Skills for Planet movement. And to join a movement is almost political, and it's like empowering people to have, it's almost requiring people to change behavior to join the movement, which is one of your whole skill areas, right? How do you build a movement, and how do you empower people to join? So from the school bit, that's pretty obvious, but I guess you still need to persuade the teachers, you need to persuade change into the curriculum. But how do you build a movement?
Well, we're still in the process of it, so we'll have to look in 2030 to see whether we've been successful or not. But I think part of it is just being open from the start, right? That Design Council have launched this movement to upskill 1 million designers with green design skills, but we cannot get there alone. As I said, we're a small independent charity, so it's about being open and empowering others to join the journey. So across every part of the skills program, we are working so closely with partners. I mentioned Pearson developing resources. We've also got 15 universities who are on the ground embedding the blueprint into their design programs, unis like Bath Spa University, Cardiff Metropolitan and others, and also being guided by the Council for Higher Education in Art and Design. We really rely on and want to empower at all crossroads, really. The universities, schools, the systems, the structures, the organizations to be part of this movement. So firstly, it's about being honest that we're not going to do it alone and we need partners to join. So there's a lot of that relationship building that happens behind the scenes, and making sure that we are doing what we can as Design Council to support those partners, but we're also holding our initiatives lightly enough that others can join and interpret for their own parts of the ecosystem, really. And then also, I think a big thing, which I will be honest, I was skeptical about at the beginning, is we've gone out there with a very big, bold ambition to upskill 1 million designers. That is a big number. And sometimes that makes me nervous because we've set ourselves up from the outset to achieve this quite big number that's out there. But it also acts as a really, really successful campaigning tool at the end of the day. So of course we are tracking impact against that number, and it is our genuine desire to upskill 1 million designers, because that will help create a turning point to allow green design to become part and parcel of everyday design practice. But if we didn't put that number out there, it feels a bit kind of wishy-washy, or it doesn't feel as compelling as big. So people are motivated to join something that feels big from the start, I've learned. And then also just to co-create at every step of the way and to try and make sure that people can get their say. And we're very lucky to have a network of 250 design council experts that are primed to help us do that.
If you want to upskill 1 million designers, that's I'm assuming that that's for the UK, right? Only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know how many designers we are in the UK? Like just in comparison?
Yeah, so there's 1.97 million people in the design economy in the UK. That's from our design economy research, but that's designers and also non-designers that work within the design sector. So that's how we define the design economy. But we obviously, when we look at 1 million, we're also including in that young people who might not be designers by name yet, but are budding designers who will hopefully get there. So there's a little bit of flexibility in the terminology there.
And then just a follow-up question to that, is that what, like the impact or the metric would be we've reached or impacted 1 million, but then do they need to do something else? Like 1 million that are, I don't know, with work or at work or with a studio, et cetera, like something else that is like an action that has attached to the number, or it's the number that you're looking for?
Mm-hmm. So our metric is 1 million upskilled, right? And that's because our assumption, our hypothesis is that if you have 1 million designers, so over half the design economy upskilled within the UK, then that creates a tipping point that we can't go back from, where enough designers, enough young people, enough budding designers coming through the education system have the skills needed to operate in this way, to design for planet. That's brilliant. That means that the design practice itself will shift and is shifting. When we say upskilled, what do we mean by upskilled? So we're defining it across a series of tiers. So the first tier of being upskilled is simply awareness and engagement. And it's our belief that if we can build awareness within the sector, that again creates the incentive to then go away and do further personal development, to go away and take a course, to go away and explore the skills in your own right. So a lot of our stats from year one, the first year of the skills program, have been in that awareness tier. But as we progress through the program between now and 2030, the belief is that, or the intention is very much that we dig into those latter tiers, which are around personal development, which are around organizational kind of structure shifts, which are around being able to lead and teach the skills. And as you push into those later tiers, what you get is a much more meaningful, deeper upskilling that happens. But we have to kind of accept that at the moment, some of that 1 million, at least in the early stages, are going to be about building awareness. So we're trying to kind of hold ourselves to account, but also be open to the fact that we aren't just going to get 1 million designers with really robust skills within the first year of the program. It's just not going to happen. And that building a movement happens over time.
Yeah.
So the skills that you've mentioned, there's quite a few of them: regenerative nature, embedding circularity, for example. Can you just explain to our listeners what is regenerating nature?
Sure. So regenerating nature is the first skill area in the blueprint, and it's all about making sure that when you are designing, so from the outset of the design decision-making process, that you are considering nature at every turn. So one of the skills within the regenerating nature area of the blueprint is about representing nature in design. So that might mean thinking really carefully about how are you going to give nature a seat at the table. And it can sound quite silly and a bit woo-woo, but actually there's real evidence of organizations who represent nature having genuine outcomes for the environment. So for example, Faith in Nature is another one of the case studies in the blueprint, and they were the first company to put nature on the board, on their governing board. So that means that nature has a legal representation within the organization. They, at every point of their design process, they have a nature guardian. So that is someone in the room who is the voice of nature, who is encouraging all the design decisions that are made to be made from or with the knowledge of what the outcomes for nature might be. So as a designer, it means being really open to considering other perspectives. You know, we've already gone through that journey of developing a human-centered awareness, right? And thinking about how we can design in a way that gives people what they need. Now we just need to do the same, but thinking about what the planet
Nature.
needs. So that's what that one is about.
And that's
I've heard it before as well. Patagonia has done it actually as well.
to bring
putting
nature.
putting nature as a stakeholder, and that has been incredible as well.
And I think there's also work done on actually measuring biodiversity index and looking at in different areas. And this was, I think, alongside the skills. So you said apart from building the planet is to motivate people to join. Part of it is through the education they're receiving. So actually, they've got no choice, because if they choose to be a designer, they're then bringing that along. But that raises the awareness. Alongside that, there's agency. So if you think about different careers, one design careers, you may have full agency. And I think the examples you've given are startups where they have got full agencies. When you're embedded in a company, there isn't full agency. Right? So if you're in a large company which is making a particular like a product or product service system, you are responsible for a part of that design, usually not even the whole thing. And the idea that a designer is on his own is quite challenging. Do you see alongside this the need to develop tools to be embedded? Because going to give you examples. So life cycle analysis, where you look at a product and you think about each phase and the impact on the environment, all the way through from cradle to grave, right? All the way through to the end until it's disposed of.
Exactly.
That's a tool. And people have tried to bring that to inform designers to make decisions. So as you say, 80% of decisions are made by the designers, and they impact the life cycle of the product and the cost and all the decision making that come across. But the tools to allow designers to assess this is fairly limited. So even life cycle analysis almost is post product. But if you are the designer there, you may have a very good desire to bring these skills and want to make a change for the environment. But one, you may not have the agency because there's regulations, there's safety, there's lots of other things to think about in there. And two, you might not have the knowledge to bring that relevant to making that decision and choosing the material or choosing whatever you're doing or the process. Do you see alongside this a need to have new tools? Or are some of those 6 skills or methods, however we want to call them, or are some of those areas well developed and there's others that need a bigger focus?
It's a good question. And I think we need skills, we need tools, we need the right processes, we need the right mindsets. We are obviously, with the Skills for Planet movement, focusing on the skills piece of the puzzle, but that's not to say that other complementary tools couldn't be created that help ensure that the skills that are developed can then land in the right way. We, within the blueprint, on every skill page that we have, there is also linked resources. Some of them are tools, some of them are reading materials, but there are some tools that do exist that we found helpful enough to include in the blueprint. We've also got our systemic design toolkit on the Design Council's website as well. And that is a series of tools to help encourage systemic design, which, as we've spoken about, really sits across all of this. When it comes to life cycle analysis and the other more technical tools or methods that are needed, obviously that also has its place and serves a role too. But what we want to ensure is that we give designers the skills, or we help encourage designers to develop the skills that are needed to then use those tools effectively, because there's no point those tools existing if people can't use them. So one thing I found while developing the blueprint was that you can become quite easily knotted in what actually is a skill, what is a piece of knowledge, what is a tool, and often they're really intersecting. So sometimes the dividing lines between them aren't neat, and that actually a skill might interact very closely with a tool, or sometimes even be one and the same thing. So that's interesting to bear in mind, I think, as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have a question around, you mentioned, I'm just going to go back to right at the beginning of the episode where you mentioned that you were fleshing out some ideas from the Design Council to kind of like, what are the topics that we should be focusing on, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I have to ask, now that we are in this AI or artificial intelligence revolution at the moment, like, what were the decisions there to focus on planetary design and kind of like green skills, and not necessarily looking at like how design is adding to the artificial intelligence kind of movement that is happening at the moment?
So, well, firstly, just to be clear, as much as I enjoy having agency over the Skills for Planet program, I obviously did not set the Design Council's Design for Planet mission myself. But if you're asking about why we're focusing on Design for Planet specifically as opposed to AI, I think my answer, and speaking from my own perspective here, is just that, as I said at the outset, it is the biggest crisis we face, that there's almost no point looking or focusing on AI if we aren't thinking about the climate crises that we're facing. You know, every fraction of a degree of warming is having a catastrophic impact on our planet. So we believe really strongly at Design Council that designers have a huge role to play in addressing the climate crisis and in providing part of what can be solution. And that's not just avoiding harm, it's actively regenerating the planet through design as well, whether you're a product designer, service designer, architect, doesn't matter. Everyone has a role to play. So I think that's important to say, because if we double down on AI skills, but it's in a vacuum that is separate to designing for planet, you know, what's the point? That said, you also touched on an important point, which is that there is a risk that as we're increasingly using AI tools, that we are also then adding to the problem because of the intensive amount of energy that is used when AI tools are being used. So it is a consideration. There's also another consideration, which is that when designers are putting their designs out there, that there's an intellectual property risk. So we need designers to have the ability to ensure that they've got their own kind of IP rights, and AI is infringing on that, or can quite easily infringe upon that, when designers' ideas are kind of taken and adopted, or maybe their designs that sit out there are data that's then feeding an AI without permission. So all of these things need to be considered. But I think our bedrock, or our foundational starting point and mission, is Design for Planet. So anything that we explore from an AI perspective should relate back to that bigger question at hand.
So
exactly. It's like in the overarching theme that is a planet, the world, the biodiversity.
This movement, I gave a debate in a big design conference on the role of products and whether they're going to disappear. And my argument was, yes, products are moving towards services and product service systems. So that thinking of how product moves to product service system is beyond an individual skills that I see identified in those Design for Planets, but actually is a very major way to support design for the planet. And that's actually by not designing a product in the first place. That's the first one, which is not coming through to me in that discussion. And there is one take on AI, that it is energy consumption. There are researchers looking at how to reduce the energy consumption and energy efficiency and how to do data processing. But there's a part of that. So part of my debate was looking at digital and circular economy together. So part of that move, digital economy and AI can be part of that movement, or there is another perspective which would be interesting to explore, probably not today because it's a big topic, but where AI can be used to support the design of planet and help us generate solutions quicker and faster. And it's not sort of dismissing the other concerns around sustainability impact or copyright and data. They're all important, but there is that's slightly more nuanced than being just so black and white in there. But I think this is probably a good point to start thinking about takeaways. And Rachel, what would be your single takeaway that you'd want to leave people with?
If you're a designer listening, then my main takeaway would be that you absolutely do have the ability to change things for the better and to design for planet in your work. You have the ability to influence, you have the ability to ensure that the skills that you use day to day are positive for the planet and for people. So check out the Skills for Planet blueprint and follow along for what we're doing with the Skills for Planet movement so that you can continue to develop skills that are going to help planet and not just people.
No, Rachel, that's great. And I think some of the takeaways I've heard is that you're really influencing skills all the way through the life cycle of a designer, from potential designers, from children who are just thinking about it. Maybe they don't go into design and they go into a different career, but that thinking will still come with them into the other career paths through to education, but also industry. And I also take away that skill is just one part of the puzzle, that it's together with tools, together with methods, together with business models that bring those elements together. So we're very excited that in our next episode, we're going to be focusing on rethinking design and Project Love. And that's with Clive Gringer, who's one of the co-founders of Tangerine and also one of my former colleagues at the Royal College of Art. So thank you. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think, or if you have an idea for a future guest or topic at www.decodedpodcast.com.
Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen, and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at decoded.podcast. See you!